Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions, and the portfolio this afternoon is education and skills. As ever, I would appreciate succinct questions and answers in order to get in as many members as possible. And at question number 1, I call Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will launch an independent review of the 2024 Higher History exam in light of reports that responses to a survey by the Scottish Association of Teachers of History were overwhelmingly critical of the SQA review, that it had been described as a whitewash, and that one respondent referred to it as, and I quote, "the most biased and useless investigation I have ever seen a public body attempt to pass off as legitimate."
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government has accepted the findings of the SQA's 2024 Higher History Review, which was an operational matter for the SQA. The Scottish Government and SQA met with the Scottish Association of Teachers of History immediately after the publication of the survey results and agreed that there would be a package of measures to support teachers delivering higher history in 2025, including a dedicated inquiry line so that teachers, lecturers and school leaders can raise questions directly with SQA, and another Understanding Standards webinar has also been organised. Further, I have asked to meet with the President of SATH and I look forward to doing so.
Douglas Ross.
The Cabinet Secretary mentioned she accepts the SQA review. Why will she not accept the findings of the survey by the Scottish Association of Teachers of History? It was overwhelmingly critical and did not accept the outcome of that independent review. And the Cabinet Secretary mentioned a meeting that the Scottish Association of Teachers of History had with the SQA. Their President said that it didn't look at the possibility of having another investigation and looking back at what went wrong this time. Will the Cabinet Secretary take her head out of the sand and accept this has not gone well, it has not been handled well by the Government or the SQA, and the only way to resolve this to please all parties is to have a truly independent review?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I thank Mr Ross for his involvement and interest in this matter. Of course, we discussed this extensively at his committee prior to Christmas. I have taken an active interest in all of the matters that he has raised today, particularly in relation to the involvement of the Scottish Association of History Teachers, the Professional Association of History Teachers. It was at my behest that we continue that further engagement with SATH. And of course, Kirsty MacDonald, SATH President, has said that SATH has gathered the views of Scottish history teachers on this issue in order to ensure that everyone in the teaching community can have their voices heard. We are pleased that the SQA and the Scottish Government are keen to action many of the points raised in the survey and work with SATH Committee towards positive outcomes. I look forward to my engagement with the President directly on that matter. I'm more than happy to engage further with the member on this, because I do recognise legitimate concerns that he has raised today, and I have acknowledged the various concerns that have been raised by history teachers in the SATH survey responses and the need to rebuild trust and confidence. Of course, as I alluded to in my original answer, Presiding Officer, Scottish Government and SQA have engaged substantially with SATH as an organisation following the publication of this review. I will continue to engage with the President, and I'm more than happy to engage with Mr Ross on this issue, because I do recognise the concerns that he has raised today.
Supplementary, Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, how will the Education Scotland Bill help to rebuild trust in qualifications for pupils, teachers, parents and carers?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the issue of trust links directly to our broader agenda in relation to education reform, and it is essential that Qualifications Scotland acts and feels differently to those that it served. The bill provides a framework that strengthens how it puts young people, adult learners and our teaching professions at the centre of decision-making. That will be achieved through new governance and accountability measures that promote participation, transparency and openness, such as the learner and teacher charters and committees. And a strategic advisory council will also provide a platform for parents and carers and other key stakeholders to advise the organisation.
And supplementary, Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And the Cabinet Secretary, of course, will know that it is not just the Association of History Teachers who are furious. She's also had correspondence, as I have, from a teacher who said there is a huge distrust between teachers and the SQA. They're a laughingstock. And another has said they've mucked up kids' futures. That the Cabinet Secretary still won't launch or instruct an independent inquiry really does beg our belief. In the committee session with the SQA on the 4th of December, the Cabinet Secretary said, "I've not yet been presented with an evidence base to substantiate instructing the Chief Examiner to lead an independent review." So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, why isn't the view of Scottish history teachers and the Scottish Association of History Teachers substantial enough to act?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member again for her interest in this matter. We discussed it substantially at the Education Committee prior to Christmas, as I alluded to in my previous response. I think it worthwhile saying, Presiding Officer, not all history teachers deliver history at higher level, and not all history teachers are involved in the marking of history qualifications. Around 17% of history teachers responded to the SATH survey, and the issue I was raising at committee was the need for us to look objectively at anything within that independent report that was carried out by the SQA, and for history teachers to engage with the government on that matter. I have done so, and I have made very clear on the record my continued keenness, as I said in my response to Mr Ross, to engage with the history sector. I will be doing that directly with the President of SATH. And of course, it is also worthwhile reflecting that SQA have announced more support for history teachers, including that direct inquiry point and additional understanding standards webinar, which I think has broadly been welcomed by SATH. But I don't want to stop my engagement with the sector. I will continue that via the auspices of the President of SATH, and I'm more than happy to update the member on that or any other matters that may come to me in that regard. It's hugely important, as I made clear in my response, I think, to Ms Dunbar, that history teachers have confidence in the qualifications body, but it's also a key reason that we need education reform.
Question number 2, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what action it's taken to ensure that there is adequate childcare provision in island communities, including the Orkney constituency.
Minister Natalie Dawn-Innes.
High quality, accessible and affordable early learning and childcare is vital in island communities to support children's outcomes and to enable parents or carers to train, work or study. We fully fund local authorities to deliver 1140 hours of ELC to eligible children, backed by almost £1 billion of funding each year, with each council responsible for ensuring that local provision meets families' needs. In addition, at a national level, Scottish Government is currently supporting projects to improve childcare provision in island communities through the National Islands Plan, our early adopter communities and the Programme for Scotland's Childminding Future.
Liam MacArthur.
I thank the Minister for that response. She acknowledged the specific challenges facing island and rural areas when it comes to childcare provision when I raised this issue with our education questions last summer. Sadly, there hasn't been much of an improvement in the situation. I've been contacted by a constituent who explained that despite the availability of spaces at her local nursery, there was not the staffing capacity to allow her 2-year-old to be given a place. So what more can the Minister do to assist local authorities like Orkney Islands Council to recruit and retain the staff required to deliver the childcare promised by the Government and which is desperately needed by parents in my constituency?
Minister.
I thank Mr MacArthur for that answer, and I'm sorry to hear about those challenges. We are working to increase uptake of 2-year-old provision across local authorities, but I really do recognise some of the particular and distinct challenges in those areas. I welcomed the opportunity to meet Highlands and Islands Enterprise recently to discuss some of these issues, and I've asked them to report in the spring so that to support and to consolidate our knowledge in this area, and I'll consider the findings of this report carefully when it's made available. And as I said in my first answer, we're also working with island communities, local authorities and other partners to ensure the new Islands Plan continues to deliver. I also understand Orkney are taking part in the retention strand of SCMA's Programme for Scotland's Childminding Future, funded time off the floor. And as I think childminding is a really critical part of the challenges that Mr MacArthur's outlined to me today, I'd really encourage him to engage with Orkney Council on how access to this programme could benefit. And of course, my offer in his previous question last summer to meet still stands if he would wish to.
Question number 3, Colin Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the data from the Pupils Census Supplementary Statistics, which reportedly shows that the number of pupils with additional support needs in Dumfries and Galloway increased by over 1,000 between 2019 and 2023.
Cabinet Secretary.
Figures published last month show that nationally 40.5% of school-aged children were recorded as having an additional support need in 2024. These figures show an increased recognition by local authorities of the needs of pupils, which is in turn reflective of the inclusive approach taken by this government to education. However, I also accept that this presents challenges across our education system. That is why next year's budget includes additional investment of £29 million for additional support for learning for local authorities, including Dumfries and Galloway. This builds on our joint work already underway with COSLA to deliver the additional support for learning action plan.
Colin Smith.
So while these figures show a 60% rise in ESN pupils in Dumfries and Galloway since 2019, and that number I know is continuing to rise, the number of ASL teachers has also been cut by 16% for the same period and by a shocking 40% since 2010. So what assurances can the Cabinet Secretary give that these cuts in ASL teachers will be fully reversed by the Government's budget and through the recruitment of additional teachers at a time that the Council are actually consulting on further cuts to ASL teachers, because behind these numbers are far too many young people that are simply not getting the support that they need?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his question, and I recognise some of the challenge here. He will recognise, of course, that thanks to additional investment from this government, the overall number of teachers in Scottish schools since 2014 has increased by over 2,500. However, I recognise the challenge here. He will also know that I updated Parliament on the government's response to this before the Christmas break, and of course at that time I gave an update to Parliament in relation to the agreement we have reached with local authorities, which will see the £145 million, its ring-fence for teacher numbers, uprated by £41 million, and it will also secure additional investment for additional support for learning. And the purpose of that additional £29 million is to provide additionality to local authorities like Dumfries and Galloway to allow them to invest in specialists, because we know those specialists make a real difference. And I very much hope that the member will be encouraged by that investment from this government and will be inclined to support the budget when it comes to Parliament.
Question number 4, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to improve discipline in schools.
Cabinet Secretary.
We published a joint behaviour action plan with COSLA last August, setting out action being taken over the next 3 years at both national and local level to help support schools to improve relationships and behaviour. Since May 2023, we have responded to schools' concerns in a number of different ways. This includes the National Action Plan, publication of new guidance on gender-based violence, mobile phones and anti-bullying, and the provision of additional funding to support training of support staff. The budget, if passed, also offers a package of measures worth an additional £29 million for ASN, which will include support for the recruitment and retention of the ASN workforce.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply, and I note she referred to the further £28 million for additional support needs teachers and £1 million to aid the retention and recruitment. Can the Cabinet Secretary say whether she anticipates an improvement in classroom discipline, given it will better enable those ASN pupils who might otherwise struggle to better access and engage with the curriculum?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Government is absolutely determined to increase teacher numbers in Scotland schools, which is of course why we have reached the agreement that I alluded to in my response to Mr Smith, which I think will make a real difference in our schools, particularly in relation to some of the behaviour and relationship shifts that we have seen post-COVID. Of course, post-COVID, we know that a number of young people have really struggled with the return to formal education, which has impacted on behaviour and relationships in our classrooms. This is a problem not just in Scotland, but across the UK and globally. We also recognise the growth in ASN presents additional challenges, and we remain committed to improving how children and young people get the support they need with their learning. That's, of course, why we have committed that additional £29 million that I spoke to in my previous response, which is very much targeted on enhancing the ASN workforce.
Supplementary, Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Teachers and unions have warned ministers that there are many more incidents of violence taking place in our classrooms than are reported. This being because teachers just don't have the time to report these incidents. The Minister references the action plan. This had 2 key points within it: the lack of options of how to manage the behaviour of a small core group of pupils, and also a lack of alternative options and resources for pupils of whom mainstream education may not be appropriate. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what in the budget will help address these 2 things?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his interest in this. I think in relation to reporting, he spoke about the time, for example, that teachers might take in relation to reporting and recording some of these incidents. But I have to say, from my experience, there's also often a reticence from staff to report because they are concerned about how that might be perceived in terms of their school, and we should reflect that in government. I was very clear in my update to Parliament in November 2023, I think now, that we wanted consistent and clear recording and reporting of these incidents as and when they appear in our schools, because at the current time I think there is a level of reticence. The action plan sets out a range of different measures in that regard, and of course the additional funding that I spoke to in my previous response, both for teacher numbers but also for ASN specialists, which includes things like behaviour, I think is really fundamental to addressing the issues that Mr Briggs has raised today.
And supplementary, Willie Rennie.
I'm concerned about the level of violence and harassment against girls at school. But I'm also concerned about the low take-up of the Equally Safe programme. We were supposed to have it up about half of all schools by 2020. It's only at a third of all schools. So what is the Cabinet Secretary doing to improve the uptake of that so we can tackle violence against girls?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think the member raises an important point. This was reported in the national press, I think, over the recess period. I share his concerns. I've asked officials for further advice on this. Of course, the Equally Safe strategy works alongside the Gender-Based Violence Framework, which was launched last March. And it's really important that these complementary pieces of work in tandem to help tackle issues in relation to misogyny. We know there are issues here, particularly post-pandemic, but we saw in the government's own research that published in late 23 the increase in relation to misogynistic behaviour, particularly from male pupils, directed often towards their female teachers. So it's hugely important that these issues are addressed. I've asked for further advice on this. I'd be more than happy to share some of that with Mr Rennie, because it's really important that all schools are aware of the different approaches at their disposal, either through the Equally Safe work or through the Gender-Based Violence Framework.
Question number 5, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what role schools can play in ensuring children develop lifelong physical literacy skills.
Cabinet Secretary.
Schools ensure children develop physical literacy skills with physical education, activity and sport embedded in the curriculum framework. Active Schools provides opportunities to participate in physical activity while developing pathways between schools and sports clubs in the community. Our Active Play Development Project also develops physical skills in early year settings. At July 2024, 99.6% of primary schools and 95.9% of secondary schools delivered at least 2 hours of PE per week for pupils in primary school and at least 2 50-minute periods of PE per week for pupils between S1 and S4.
Brian Whittle.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but during the pandemic, UNESCO reported that the schools closed. There was a significant loss of school-based physical activity, with many children becoming socially isolated and lacking in movement opportunities. Huggett and Howell's research completed post-lockdown observed in 4 to 5-year-olds that there was a significant difference compared to expected age-related physical development, and it understands that 1 in 6 children aged 5 to 16 are now likely to have mental health conditions, which is an increase from 1 in 10 prior to the outbreak of the pandemic. Does the Scottish Government recognise the need to educate young people about their mental and physical health in conjunction with reversing the continuing decline in the opportunities available to be active in schools? And does it agree this is one of the greatest health and education priorities we face?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Mr Whittle for his supplementary on this. I very much share his passion for this subject. I recognise the importance of physical education, particularly in educational settings, in terms of attainment, in terms of behaviour, and also in terms of behaviour and relationships. And of course, it's often the case that it won't be necessarily a PE teacher that's leading some of these after-school clubs. And I should declare that when I was teaching many years ago, Mr Whittle might be amused to know I took a hockey club when I was teaching at Elgin High School for a number of weeks. So there are opportunities for staff across the school estate to be engaged in building better relationships, which actually helps with behaviour and in facilitating greater opportunities in relation to physical literacy. I know post-pandemic there are challenges in our schools. I think it is worthwhile recounting some of the progress we've seen here. I gave the statistics in my initial response, Presiding Officer, but it is remarkable when we look back to the position in the school session of 2004-05, when only 10% of schools were providing the amount of PE that we see provided now. However, that's not the end of the story. The additional investment we provide via the Active Schools Coordinators, which amounts to, I think, £13 million annually, also has a substantial role to play in that regard. And I should say, finally,
Cabinet Secretary, we need to make progress. Could you please bring
the education reform work that we're engaged in that regard also has an opportunity to drive improvements here. I'd be more than happy to write to the member to give him a further update on that work.
Supplementary, Gordon MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland was the world's first Daily Mile nation. Can the Cabinet Secretary set out the work that the Scottish Government has done to encourage further take-up of the Daily Mile?
Cabinet Secretary.
Back in September 2022, Scotland was announced as the first Daily Mile nation worldwide, with rollouts to nurseries, schools, colleges, universities and workplaces across the country. There are currently over 1,000 nurseries, school and SEND schools participating in Scotland. Over 164,000 children and young people benefit from the Daily Mile across Scotland. The Daily Mile, of course, can be implemented at no cost, and its transformational impact is very well evidenced, improving not only the child's fitness, but also their concentration levels, mood, behaviour and their general well-being.
Question number 6, Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to tackle antisocial behaviour and safeguard the welfare of girls in schools.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government's Gender Equality Task Force in Education and Learning asserts all girls and young women should have a gender equal experience of education in an environment free from sexism, sexual harassment and violence. It follows a preventative approach as outlined in Equally Safe, Scotland's strategy to prevent violence against women and girls. In March, I launched Preventing and Responding to Gender-Based Violence, a whole school framework which supports schools to address the underlying causes of GBV, ensuring appropriate action is taken in response to specific incidents.
Sharon Dowie.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. She will be aware of the recent horrifying case at Dundee Secondary School where a hidden camera was discovered in a toilet roll holder, reportedly in a unisex bathroom. A 15-year-old boy has been charged with reports suggesting the camera contained hundreds of sensitive images of girls. This has left pupils and parents angry and traumatised, with at least one girl refusing to return to school. Cabinet Secretary, this is not a single isolated incident. We recently heard from a teacher at a round table of appalling and sadly frequent instances where boys took advantages of unisex toilets to slip phones under cubicles and film girls using the toilets. Given these disturbing incidents, will the Cabinet Secretary recognise the significant safeguarding risks of unisex toilets, and will she commit to ensuring all toilets are returned to single sex to protect young girls?
Before I ask the Cabinet Secretary to respond, I think there was a reference to a live case there, so obviously the usual caveats would apply. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And just to reflect the points you have made, I'm not able to comment on a live case. I am aware of the incident that she has raised. I think it was raised with the First Minister at the time in the Chamber. It's obviously deeply disturbing. I also want to reflect some of the wider work the Government's been undertaking in this space. I think I alluded to some of that to Mr Rennie, but of course there will be a summit on Monday to which I think the member is invited to, along with the First Minister, which looks at youth violence and challenges in that respect in the round, with a number of other MSPs being engaged in that work on a cross-party basis. Some of these issues are systemic to our society at the current time in relation to the increases we've seen in misogynistic behaviour. I've documented some of the work the Government's undertaken in relation to the behaviour in Scottish schools research, the gender-based violence framework, but it is deeply concerning some of the changes we have seen, particularly in our young men in recent times, and it's hugely important that schools are supported in that regard. She asked a specific question in relation to the provision of toilets, which is of course a matter for local authorities, although I'm happy to engage them on these issues, and I recognise the concerns that she has raised this afternoon. I look forward to further engagement with her on this issue, and of course she'll be attending the summit along with the First Minister on Monday.
And supplementary, David Torrance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Cabinet Secretary, how has the Mentors and Violence Prevention Programme been supported by the Scottish Government to address gender-based violence in schools?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we are continuing to invest to support Education Scotland to nationally coordinate the training and the delivery for the Mentors and Violence Prevention Programme in schools across Scotland. The Mentors and Violence Prevention Programme has delivered in over 200 schools across all of our local authorities, and this has included 5,800 senior pupil mentors delivering violence prevention lessons to more young people. Through the programme itself, we are engaging young people to understand different forms of violence, including gender-based violence, and how they are related, teaching young people ways to speak out against gender-based violence, bullying, abusive and violent behaviour. The programme itself enables boys and girls to become part of the solution to help eradicate gender-based violence in Scotland.
Question number 7, Elena Whittam, who is joining us remotely. Ms Whittam.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the progress being made to improve the learning outcomes of pupils to prepare them for careers in the technology sector.
Minister Graham Day.
Also, work to improve the sciences curriculum as part of the curriculum improvement cycle is now underway, with technology starting in early 2025. This has been led by Education Scotland and is establishing a planned and systematic approach to curriculum improvement. This will support high-quality teaching, learning and progression across all curricular areas. We've provided over £1.2 million this financial year alone to organisations which are supporting high-quality delivery of STEM in schools and helping to develop STEM subjects such as computing science as attractive and relevant subject choices.
Elena Whittam.
I thank the Minister for his answer, and I know that he will be aware of the wonderful Education Scotland Cyber First Girls competition, where Girvan Academy in my constituency recently made the shortlist of 10 finalists in the competition designed for girls to enter the world of cyber technology and security. Noting this fantastic achievement, does the Minister agree with me that it is vital that continued support is provided to equip our young girls with these much-needed skills to engage, nurture and inspire them into the field of computer sciences, providing them with the skills Scotland's technology sector sector and wider economy will fundamentally depend upon.
Minister.
I do, and I'm encouraged, of course, that in recent years there's been an increase in the number of girls undertaking computing science courses, not least of all because closing the equity gap in participation in STEM is crucial and is central to our vision for an equal Scotland. But there is, of course, more to do if we're to reach the kind of position on this that we would all want. That's why Education Scotland is working with organisations, including Tech She Can and Code Club, to promote careers in computing science to girls. We've also invested £840,000 in Scottish teachers advancing computer science to support excellence in teaching of computing science and the promotion of the subject to pupils and parents.
And supplementary, Ros McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. In evidence given to the Education Committee, the Scottish Government's former Chief Entrepreneurial Advisor, Mark Logan, was particularly critical of the Scottish Government's lack of progress on computing science teaching reform. He cited figures gathered at local authority level which showed in 2024 in Scotland there were at least 32,500 pupils who had no access to a computing science teacher. The Minister can't state that the Scottish Government is currently doing enough to improve the learning outcomes for pupils to prepare them for a career in a technology sector when they just don't have access to a science teacher. So what is the Scottish Government going to do to rectify this situation?
Minister.
And obviously, if the member had listened to what I said, I actually said there is more to do. I was quite clear about that. And there is more being done. The Aberdeen University pilot, for example, that has been launched, which will help in this area. So we are in no way at all complacent. I've acknowledged quite clearly that there is more to be done in this space.
And question number 8, Mark Roscoe.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how the needs of pupils with additional support needs are taken into account in the procurement and replacement of the school estate.
Cabinet Secretary.
It is the statutory responsibility of local authorities to manage their school estate, and the Scottish Government expects them to focus on ensuring that in estate planning, learning environments recognise the needs of pupils with additional support needs. Through our £2 billion Learning Estate Investment Programme, dedicated ASN spaces will be delivered in 20 school infrastructure projects. Scottish Government and the Scottish Futures Trust will continue to learn from LEAP projects and to seek feedback from users to help inform the design of future learning spaces to support the needs of every pupil.
Mark Roscoe.
Well, can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but it is absolutely clear that there are schools being built right now without proper consideration of the promises that this government has made to future learners with additional needs. A school in Stirling Council area, for example, is being rebuilt within the next year. Current ASN provision is for 12 places, which families tell me is completely, totally oversubscribed. But the provision in the new school will again be for just 12 places, physically locking in that lack of ASN provision for years to come in the school building. So will the Cabinet Secretary review the Council school building programmes to make sure that they're fit for the future, and so that we don't end up repeating the mistakes of the PFI schools from 20 years ago?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his question. I have to say I'm rather surprised by the issue he's raised today. I'm more than happy to hear a bit more, and we can perhaps discuss that after the question session today, Presiding Officer, because, of course, the Learning Estate and Investment Programme is helping to deliver additionality across Scotland to improve the quality of our school estate. And I know there are a number of projects across the country just now which have dedicated ASN school projects. Of course, the decision around about school design is ultimately a matter for local authorities. The member has mentioned one in his own region today. But this issue was also addressed at the Education Committee last year, Presiding Officer, and at that time the engagement with Scottish Futures Trust confirmed that we had in place a 10-step plan which included, within our response to the committee, a number of different areas where we were going to strengthen some of the work in terms of ASN provision. I think more broadly, Scottish Futures Trust and the Scottish Government will continue to meet with stakeholders to engage with, for example, the cross-party group on autism in September, as they've already done so, to ensure that we learn lessons from this. But I'm quite surprised by the issue that the member has raised today. I'm more than happy to hear more on the detail of that and to see if Scottish Government officials might be able to provide further support, because it's really essential that in improving Scotland's school estate, Scotland's totality of her pupil population, including those with an identified additional support needs.
I'm keen to get a supplementary from Martin Whitfield. Supplementary.
Deputy Presiding Officer, perhaps the answer lies in the 2018 Scottish Government published report on the consultation exercise looking at updating school premises general requirements and standards, Scotland Regulations 1967, which included the requirement to look at ASN provision. What's happened to this since 2018?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his interest in this issue. In relation to the regulations, of course, there was consultation previously undertaken on this. My officials are about to provide me with further advice to that end, and I will write to the member with an update.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on education and skills. And there'll be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow frontbench teams to change position should they so wish. Thank you.